Welcome to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and we saw some great action and upsets in Week 4, and I'm pretty sure we will be in store for more of the same in Week 5 of the FCS. Here's what we have on tap for this episode. The 7 blocks of granite at Fordham University helped build a strong foundation for their football program, which is still utilized today, and we'll explain that in our tradition segment. We will also bring you our top NFL draft prospects that you want to watch out for in Week 5. And now that one quarter of the season is done, we'll bring you our first quarter recap with awards, outstanding players, teams, and things of that nature later on in this episode. But first, as always, it's time to get into our 4-minute offense to take a look at some of the top storylines as we head into Week 5. There are only 12 unbeaten teams left in the FCS, led by North Dakota State. And of these 12 unbeaten squads that you see here, there are a few that would leap out at you as surprises. Georgetown, Cornell, and Albany. All 3 schools are off to an impressive start to the season. I was on a broadcast last weekend for Georgetown, Columbia, and the Hoyas' defense has been the story of 2016. They are forcing turnovers and are playing great at every level. Albany has done it behind a strong running game and excellent defensive play, and break up the Cornell Big Red as they have posted back-to-back wins versus Bucknell and Yale. Sophomore quarterback Dalton Banks has looked outstanding throwing the football, and the Big Red defense is forcing turnovers at a high rate. We'll see if all of these unbeaten teams, remain that way after Saturday. Last year, the SWAC Eastern Division boasted strong teams like Alabama State and Alcorn State. This year, all 5 teams on the east side have losing records. The biggest reason why has been the defensive play as a whole is definitely down this year. 4 out of the 5 teams have surrendered more than 140 points total on the season. Peeking over to the West Division, you're seeing stronger defensive play and much better and consistent offense. Prairie View, Grambling Southern, and Texas Southern are all 500 or better. And the lone Arkansas Pine Bluff victory was over the the East Division's Alcorn State in quadruple overtime. There's still enough time for the East to shape up, or it will be a West runaway to the Celebration Bowl in Atlanta this December. So far, we're seeing some tight races across the FCS conferences, and it'll only intensify as more teams dig into the meat of conference play. I'm surprised at how the Pioneer League, Northeast Conference, and Ohio Valley Conference have shown themselves so far this season. The Pioneer and NEC are normally your 1 to 2 team races, but it looked like it'll be a dogfight down to the end. And I'm not surprised at all about the SoCon. We talked about it all during the SoCon season preview over the summer, that this conference could flirt with 4 teams making a strong case for the playoffs. Chattanooga, the Citadel, Wofford, and Sanford are all looking very strong, while East Tennessee State, Mercer, and VMI are also surprising. The Keydets will kick off their SoCon season this week versus Mercer in a huge game. The Nichols Colonels are 1-2 on the season, but the record doesn't tell the entire story. The Colonels have suffered a 2-point loss to Georgia and a 1-point loss to South Alabama. Needless to say that head coach Tim Rebowe has gotten these guys to believe in themselves, and they are playing some really good football so far this season. I know close only counts in horseshoes and grenades, but you have to think that this bodes well for their chances in the Southland Conference this season, in which they are already 1-0, and they have a big-time in-state matchup this week versus McNeese State. Let's hand out some player awards from last week. Our Offensive Player of the Week was Lehigh's quarterback Nick Shevnisky. The senior signal caller passed for 461 yards and 4 touchdowns as the Mountain Hawks were able to sprint past the Princeton Tigers in front of nearly 5,500 fans at Goodman Stadium. Shevnisky has 5 rushing touchdowns and 9 passing touchdowns on the season. Defensive Player of the Week, the entire Wofford Terriers defense. The entire defense gets Player of the Week honors for being the only FCS squad to pitch a shutout, and they did so in impressive fashion versus East Tennessee State. The Terriers only allowed 5 first downs, 83 yards passing, and held ETSU to -7 yards rushing on the day. The Bucks were only able to garner 76 yards of total offense as Wofford's defense dominated at every level. Our Special Teams Player of the Week is Columbia returner Josh Wainwright. I called the Columbia-Georgetown game, as I mentioned earlier, and we couldn't say enough positive things about the freshman receiver Josh Wainwright. The 5'11", 175-pounder from Austin, Texas, returned 8 punts for 52 yards and 3 kickoffs for 91 yards. He set up the Lions' offense in good field position all game long. But, and this is a big one, he did have the crucial fumble that ended up costing them the game. I can't let that overshadow how well he played and the fearlessness he showed with every return. So keep your head up, freshman. You'll have many better and brighter days, but this was a very impressive showing. We'll take a quick break and be back with more of the FCS Kickoff.
New York City is the largest market for broadcast media. It's the epicenter for the TV and radio industry. If you ever had a dream of working in the thrilling broadcast world, then make it a reality by going to the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. CSB has helped numerous people get a job with hands-on training and a learn-by-doing mentality. You will learn all of the high-tech equipment in the TV and radio studios. From hosting your own radio show, to being a news or sports anchor, operating a camera in the TV studio, or editing audio and video, the choice is yours. Graduates from CSB have gone on to work at some of the major companies in the industry. To get more information, call 1-800-TV-RADIO or check us out at gocsb.com. Your road to success starts here at the Connecticut School of Broadcasting.
I think FCS presents such a great opportunity, at a school like Fordham and the rest of the Patriot League schools to get the best of both worlds. You're talking about, some of the top 60 academic institutions in the country. Combine that with, full scholarship Division I football that's able to compete on a national level. I think, from a recruiting standpoint and talking to other coaches, that's what we're identifying. We're identifying guys that academics and football are equally important. Not one more than the other, but truly equally important. I think that's the strength of FCS football, certainly in the Patriot League.
Last week, we saw Western Illinois take down Northern Illinois and Central Arkansas take down Arkansas State as more FBS programs fell victim to the FCS. We also saw Kennesaw State notch a big-time win for their program over Duquesne. So who will be the next to suffer a surprising loss this week? Well, let's find out which team should be on upset alert for Week 5. The Penn-Dartmouth game enters upset alert because of Penn's ability to strike quick on offense. We talk about it every week on this show, how Penn's offensive triplets of Alex Torgerson, a quarterback, running back Trey Solomon, and wide receiver Justin Watson is enough to frustrate any defense in the FCS. The issue has been the untimely turnover in a defense that has issues in stopping the run or winning inside the red zone. Dartmouth's defense has been a pleasant surprise considering the talent that they lost this past offseason. Linebacker Faloran Orimolade leads the team with 5 TFLs, 17 tackles, and 2 sacks. Offensively may have been an even bigger surprise with quarterback Jack Hennigan playing some really good ball. Again, this smells like a closer than you would expect type game. Penn's offense is due for a breakout performance. I just think Dartmouth's defense will be able to get the stops needed and move on to 3-0. The Colonels have been very impressive defensively this season, and it has a lot to do with their ability to defend the pass. The secondary, led by senior cornerback Jeff Hall, has picked off 6 passes so far and has held opponents, including Georgia and South Alabama, to only 226 yards passing a game. McNeese State has had issues themselves on defense. The Cowboys at times haven't been able to get stops when needed to close out games. The biggest battle will be with their defensive front versus the Colonels' athletic offensive line. I like McNeese in this ball game. I don't think right now this young Colonels offense has enough firepower to really threaten the Cowboys in this one. Their defense will be game, but they may run out of steam later on in the contest.
Don't forget to check out and grab your copy of our 2 newly released books, Football, a Love Story, and What Did Football Teach Me? These books feature over 100 stories from current and former coaches, players, executives, and entertainers from across the football landscape, describing what got them involved in the game, what they love about it, and what life lessons the game taught them. You can find your copy or order your copy from our website at footballgameplan.com/books.
Well, I think the FCS is really, when you look at it, it's the perfect model for football. Okay, in that as a coach, number one, you deal with Division I, it's great. You deal with a high level of athlete. In our case, you deal with a high level of student. It's extremely competitive football. It's a great environment, but it's also doesn't have some of the trappings that the bigger levels have as far as the business and the money of things. But it's pure football. And as a coach, that's what I like is it's about the football. And I think the way we determine our champion is the best playoff system in all of sports. And I think that you can never argue with who the national champion is at the FCS level. And it's just top to bottom the most competitive bracket of playoff sports there is in any of the sports. So if you like the action, I think the quality of play is extremely high. I think the quality of person is extremely high. I think there's some great coaches at our level, and it's attainable to fans too. It's also you come to an FCS game, you have a little bit more of a close experience to the players. And in our case, the players meet the people in the town. It's right there. They're not kind of like these pros in waiting. You can reach out, you can touch them, you can meet the coaches, you can do that stuff. It's just enjoyable football at a real high level still.
Some big-time matchups this week in the FCS, and we'll start previewing some games on the schedule by starting up in the northeastern part of the country, where the Big Red of Cornell travel up the road to face the Colgate Raiders.
Only 66 miles separate these schools, and it's a huge matchup here in Week 5. The Big Red offensive attack looks like it did a few seasons ago under record-setting quarterback Jeff Matthews, and new quarterback Dalton Banks shows the same ability to throw the football all around the stadium. And although it has only been 2 games, you still have to like what you have seen from Cornell's defense, especially inside the red zone. Colgate is coming off a tough loss to Richmond, where the same issues that plagued them versus Syracuse reared its ugly head and bit them once again, the passing game. The Raiders do an excellent job versus the run, but have been susceptible to big plays in the passing game. Also, they need their own passing game to become much more consistent on a week-to-week basis. I foresee a really entertaining game, but one that will be won in the trenches. I like Colgate in this one. We'll learn a lot about the Big Red's ability to win a game without the benefit of the ability to run. It's because of that unknown I think Colgate wins the battle up front and controls the game. Georgetown travels up to Cambridge to take on the Harvard Crimson, and if you're Georgetown, you have to be excited about your defense. This is the best defense, in my opinion, for the Hoyas in quite some time. One of the big-time playmakers is outside linebacker Javion Butler, who has safety-like athleticism and does well on both ends of defense. They are also very tough up front and also at the second level, and that's where they'll have to excel versus a big-time offensive line. The Crimson do a great job in the trenches on both sides, and they boast a trio of offensive threats in wide receiver Justice Shelton Mosley, H-back Anthony Ferkser, and running back Samara Smith. Defensively, the secondary does an excellent job forcing turnovers and can match up with anyone across the board. What will be interesting in this one for the Hoyas is if they get both Matt Buckman, their do-everything H-back, back in the fold, and wide receiver Justin Hill, their outstanding playmaker on the perimeter. Both guys were dealing with some injuries last week. They can have some success throwing the football, but I don't think they can run against this Crimson defense. That's the question I think that will be very tough to answer for Georgetown. I like Harvard. Pivotal game here for both squads as William & Mary and New Hampshire meet in a CAA matchup. The Tribe's offense, more in particular their passing game, has to do a better job of protecting the football. The turnovers have put the Tribe defense in bad situations, just like last week versus Elon, in which it was a loss for William & Mary. And they can run the football, and their defense definitely is solid across the board. Now, New Hampshire is in the same boat. Their offense turns the ball over a lot, and they've had issues protecting the quarterback. The Wildcats have a tremendous tailback in Dalton Crosser that has over 360 yards rushing on the season. The biggest matchup, I think, will be the chess match that'll get played between New Hampshire safety Casey DeAndre and the Tribe's quarterback Steve Cluley. Can DeAndre bait Cluley into some bad decisions? I don't think we'll see Cluley get that opportunity. Look for head coach Jimmy Laycock to lean more on that ground game this week while his defensive line frustrates quarterback Trevor Knight and that Wildcat offense all game long. I like William & Mary. A big matchup in the Northeast Conference as Wagner plays host to Sacred Heart. The Pioneers come into this ball game with a very good defensive squad that has only given up 11 points a game. And I've been very impressed with how dynamic the Pioneers have looked offensively so far this season. They dismantled Stony Brook, which has a defense that is one of the stingiest in the FCS. Wagner is off to a surprising 2-1 start, and their offense has looked very well in those two victories, even taking an early lead versus Boston College last week. This will be their biggest FCS test to date, and will have to come into this game with a great game plan based off misdirection. We spoke last week about how tough Sacred Heart plays defensively, so it wouldn't surprise me to see the Seahawks dial up heavy screens and draw plays to combat that pressure. I do think the Seahawks are vastly improved over last season and will make things very interesting early on, but I like Sacred Heart to go into Staten Island and take care of business.
Down in the Mid-Atlantic region, we have a pivotal matchup in the MEAC as the Hampton Pirates take on the North Carolina A&T Aggies.
The Hampton Pirates are coming off a bye and had 2 weeks to prepare for the Aggies of North Carolina A&T, who are also coming off a bye week, so you'll see two fresh teams ready to battle in Greensboro, North Carolina. For the Pirates in this ball game, I like how they've worked wide receiver Rashawn Proctor into the offense as teams are trying to take away Tawarn Mixon. Those two receiving options, along with running back Yaki Johnson, gives the Pirates more than enough offense to be successful in the MEAC. Defensively, you look for them to be a bit more aggressive in an attempt to compete with that big offensive line of North Carolina A&T and slow down a running game with Tariq Cohen back there in the backfield. For North Carolina A&T, they do show the balance necessary to beat anyone on the schedule, but it's the turnovers, more so the interceptions, that'll knock them out of a game early. It's what's actually cost them an opportunity to knock off the Tulsa Golden Hurricane the last time they played. I think quarterback Lamar Renard gives them exactly what they need at the position. He'll just have to protect the ball a little bit more as they move forward. The key matchup that has to be won is up front, and when you boast the best defensive line in the conference, as North Carolina A&T does, going up against an offensive front that has issues in protecting the quarterback, I foresee a long day for Hampton, and that offense, I like the Aggies to win it. Another early season pivotal conference game, this time in a SoCon as Mercer takes on VMI. The Mercer Bears are fresh off a comeback victory over Tennessee Tech and face a VMI team that can hurt them in similar ways. The Bears secondary will face a strong test versus quarterback Al Cobb and his duo of wideouts and Aaron Sanders and Dane Forlines. The key for Mercer will be in their ability to own the time of possession and, most importantly, have it pay off in the red zone. They can do that with their ground game, so we'll see if they can be successful versus the Keydets. VMI is off to an impressive 2-1 start and knocked off Bucknell, who is very tough along both sides of the line of scrimmage. Defensive discipline will be tested in this one as they face a Bears offense that thrives on misdirection. Linebacker Ryan Francis is proven to be one of the best backers in the country and is coming off an excellent game against the Bison. Can Cobb keep the ball out of harm's way and avoid the costly turnovers? I think he can. Look for VMI to win yet another game versus a tough opponent, thrusting themselves in the thick of the SoCon race. The Delaware Blue Hens are 2-1 on the season and are coming off a loss to Wake Forest where they had some opportunities to win that game. It's been simple for the Blue Hens, run game and defense. Delaware averages over 240 yards a game on the ground and do a great job on both ends defensively. James Madison is another team that boasts similar backfield depth and talent. The Dukes come into the CAA battle averaging 226 yards a game rushing, and defensively they make their mark as well in the run defense department. So obviously this game will come down to who can make big plays in the passing game and also who can stop the big plays from happening. I like multiplicity in this sense that James Madison's quarterback Brian Shore has been excellent in that capacity. So look for a closely contested game with the Dukes coming out on top.
For me, I think the biggest thing that football taught me was how to overcome adversity.
At some point in your life, you're going to have some tough times.
You have to have that next play mentality.
That cohesiveness and that working together, that's really something special that you can't get in a lot of other areas.
When you practice that and you live that in other phases of your life, it becomes second nature because all you know how to do is fight.
It's not an easy game. If it were easy, everyone would do it.
You start to appreciate the smaller contributions that people make. You don't just look at the big one because you knew it took 6 or 7 other guys who are unsung.
And you can't take shortcuts and be successful.
Doing what they do to make it possible for the guy getting the press clippings or whatever it might be.
In this game, whether it's as a coach or a player.
So I would certainly say that you definitely got a very quick lesson in how to overcome adversity playing football.
It's never too early to take a peek at the 2017 NFL Draft, and keeping up with our weekly segment here on the FCS Kickoff, we give you 9 prospects and their matchups that you want to keep an eye on this week in our 5th Down Draft Outlook.
The first prospect you want to keep an eye on this week is Devontae Kincaid out of Grambling, 6'1", 190 pounds. They play Prairie View A&M, a very good football team in the SWAC. But what you want to keep an eye on this game is how well Kincaid does as far as delivering the football accurately down the field. His short to intermediate accuracy is where it needs to be. This is the guy that has 10 touchdown passes to only 3 interceptions, completing 64% of his passes at 8.4 yards per attempt. So he's definitely getting the job done since transferring from Ole Miss and helped lead the Tigers to a 3-1 record. I'm a big fan of Khalid Abdullah out of James Madison, 5'10", 220 pounds. He's part of a quartet of tailbacks that they have for the Dukes, but he's the lead guy. He's the guy that gets the bulk of the carries. He does a great job showing interior running skills and also that breakaway ability, but I'm more interested to see him this week versus Delaware. How well can he catch the football out of the backfield? That's something I'm going to be watching as they take on the Blue Hens. Brian Brown out of Richmond is a big-time playmaker for the Spiders within their offense at 6'2", 205. He's a guy that I believe can play all 3 receiver positions. What I'm looking for in this game versus Towson is how well he can do after the catch. I want to see him finish plays once he gets that football in his hands. Another Senior Bowl watch list guy is Eric Saubert out of Drake. The tight end at 6'5", 250 pounds is more of your flex guy, a guy with that great athleticism. Reminds me a lot of another FCS tight end that came out in recent years, and James O'Shaughnessy of Illinois State. I think he can be moved around the formation as well. He does a great job in running routes, and he's a physical force after the catch. There's a lot of talent up front for Alabama State along that offensive line, and one guy in particular that you want to keep an eye on this week as they play Arkansas Pine Bluff is Jalen Ware, the 6'8", 295-pound senior lineman that can play either left or right tackle. I'm going to be more interested to see what he does in the running game more so than what he does in pass protection. Keonta Davis gets a lot of the pub for Chattanooga, but on the opposite side, Vantrell McMillan has definitely taken advantage of the double teams that his teammate Davis sees on the opposite end. When you look at Ventrell McMillan, what he brings to the table, he has that burst, he has that closing speed, he also has a dip under move to get to the quarterback. I'm going to be watching how well he plays the running game in his matchup versus East Tennessee State. I was on the call last week for Morgan State Howard, and one guy that just kept making play after play for this Bears defense was the linebacker Greg Gibson. I love his sideline-to-sideline speed. He played a lot in space last game versus Howard, and he did a great job in stopping the run. What I want to see him do more so this week versus Delaware State is how he effectively is able to play in the pass defense department. Jeff Hall out of Nicholls State just kept popping up on film every time you watch the Colonels play. And when you look at this game coming up versus McNeese, he has a chance to put together an impressive performance versus a top-notch football team. Now, he had a great game versus Georgia. He also had a really good game versus South Alabama. So I'm expecting him to have an even bigger game against the McNeese Cowboys as they try to pull off the upset. And finally, I want you to keep an eye on the specialist, the punter, Chris Frazier of Cornell. At 6'2", 215, Frazier was a football game plan preseason All-American. He's averaging 40.5 yards a punt so far this season in the 2 games versus Bucknell and versus Yale. What I'm going to be watching for in this matchup versus a very tough Colgate opponent is how well he can down that football inside the 20. If he can do that on a consistent basis, he'll be able to check off another box that people are looking for as he moves on to the next level.
Many may not know that the Fordham Rams have an illustrious and tradition-rich football history. The Rams used to rule New York City back in the day, and with the recent success they've had, they're looking to do so once again. So we'll take a look back at how this current success and tradition was laid with just 7 blocks of granite.
Dating back to 1929, where the Rams routinely played in front of sellout crowds at the Polo Grounds, Fordham football was always a fixture in the New York City sports scene. From upsets over Boston College, Tennessee, Alabama, TCU, and Pitt, amongst others, the Rams were big time in the Big Apple. You're talking about back-to-back bowl appearances in 1940, a 1-point loss in the Cotton Bowl to Texas A&M, and a 1941 Sugar Bowl victory over Missouri. Fordham has also played in the first and second nationally televised college football games in history versus Waynesburg and Alabama. But the 7 blocks of granite was what made Fordham Fordham. Under head coach Jim Crowley, who was one of the 4 horsemen of Notre Dame, and offensive line coach Frank Leahy, who will go on to become a legendary Hall of Fame coach at Notre Dame. The 1936 offensive line, which featured Vince Lombardi, Leo Paquin, Alex Wojciechowicz, Ed Franco, Johnny Drews, Al Bobarski, and Natty Pierce, was widely considered the best in college football during their time. Their toughness, work ethic, pride, and passion are still being echoed by today's Rams, who have posted 4 straight winning seasons, 3 straight playoff appearances, and big upsets over FBS opponents. So needless to say that this renaissance period that Fordham is experiencing now is thanks to and part of the solid foundation that was laid back in the mid to late 30s.
I think that the main reason to choose HBCU is for the family atmosphere. The guys are going to get the core values that their parents taught them, that their family members tried to raise them. You'll have a close-knit atmosphere. You'll actually have guys that care about you as a person. So I think that's the main reason for choosing the HBCU.
And welcome back to the FCS Kickoff presented by the Connecticut School of Broadcasting. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook, and as we travel down south, you'll see some good tailgating as well as some good football this weekend. I think a good one on the schedule is taking place in the OVC as UT Martin takes on the undefeated Tigers of Tennessee State.
Huge battle here, and I think this is a strength versus strength battle as UT Martin's passing game with their threats on the outside led by wide receivers Ben Ackline and Silent Weathers match up against the best secondary in the OVC led by defensive back Ezra Robinson. The Skyhawks offensive line will also have to make sure the Tigers defensive end Ebenezer Ogundeko doesn't become a nuisance on the afternoon as he enters this game with 4.5 sacks on the season. Tennessee State caught a break with the bye week as that gives them an extra week to get new starting quarterback Ronald Butler ready to go against one of the more active defensive lines in the conference. With quarterback O'Shea Ackerman Carter being lost for the year, it'll be up to Butler to keep this Tigers offense potent and on pace. This will be a tough physical game, but I do like the Skyhawks to move on with the victory. Look out for quarterback Troy Cook look for him to be efficient and effective in extending drives and making sure they pay off with points. The Crusaders are coming off back-to-back victories at home and are coming into this matchup versus Morehead State with a ton of confidence. We saw last week Valpo got their ground game going and were able to stop the run versus Davidson. This week, can their pass defense make the plays necessary to knock off Morehead State? The Eagles have one of the best quarterbacks in the conference in Austin Gehafer, who has thrown 7 touchdown passes so far this season. The Eagles also started to find their offensive rhythm last week versus Drake. Now, the question is if they can find it early in games rather than later. Where they have had some success this year is in the running game, and we'll see if Valpo can make it 2 impressive run defense showings in a row. I don't think that'll be the reason why Morehead State wins it. Keep an eye on wide receiver Jake Raymond. Look for he and the Eagles to have a big day in the passing game. Contrast in styles but not philosophy as Charleston Southern and Coastal Carolina link up in Conway, South Carolina this weekend. The Bucs dismantled a very good Monmouth defense last week, and it's the multiplicity of their gun option attack that causes fits for opposing defenses. Their defense is just as dangerous as their offense, as they do a great job of maintaining the line of scrimmage and also making plays in space. In this matchup versus Coastal, they'll have to be great at both because they have one of the best running backs in the country in D'Angelo Henderson. The Chanticleer's offensive line does an excellent job executing all kinds of blocks, power blocks, zone blocks, angle blocks. It doesn't matter. Defensively, they defend the pass well and not nearly as successful versus the run, and that'll be huge in this game because they'll see run 90% of the time. As always, look for a close matchup with special teams being the deciding factor. In that respect, I like what Coastal brings to the table with their kicking game and their return game. I like the Chanticleers at home. It's the Battle of the Piney Woods as Stephen F. Austin and Sam Houston State meet up for the 91st time in their annual early season rivalry game, which takes place in Reliant Stadium in Houston, Texas. The Lumberjacks have won 3 straight games, most recently running away from Abilene Christian 41-30. The pace and spacing in which their offense operates is highly impressive. Looks like senior quarterback Hunter Taylor will get the start this week after an impressive 4-touchdown, 0-interception performance last week versus the Wildcats. They'll need that type of ball security versus the Bearcats, who come into this ball game with the best offense in the FCS. Sam Houston State averages 51 points a game, and it looks like they play at a different speed than everybody else. The perimeter strain they cause is what makes them very tough to defend. Now, where they'll need to tighten up this week is in the secondary. Stephen F. Austin puts your nickel and dime defenders in a bind because of how they're able to stretch the field vertically with their passing game. And these games, again, are always entertaining and are competitive no matter the records. I like Sam Houston State to win this one. They are a much more balanced and prepared. If one element of their offensive attack gets taken away, I think the Bearcats win this one. It's the State Fair Classic as Prairie View A&M and Grambling State get together this week at the Cotton Bowl in Dallas, Texas. This is a battle between two of the best teams in the SWAC and will be a game of matchups. The Panthers' defensive line is the best in the conference, led by Devon Reed, and Grambling's passing attack is the most dangerous, with Devontae Kincaid throwing rainbows to wide receiver Chad Williams. And both secondaries feature above-average talent across the board. This was a high-scoring affair last year as Grambling won 70-56. Now, what's different this year for the Tigers is that they really haven't been able to get things going on the ground despite having the talent in the backfield to get it done. Prairie View has a really good signal caller in senior Trey Green, who has to make sure he doesn't put the ball in harm's way versus guys stalwart in that Tigers secondary. Look for another explosive offensive showcase in this one, maybe not like 2015. I like Grambling to win this ball game. I like how Kincaid does an excellent job of keeping the offense on pace and out of bad situations.
It's different, you know. It's I think it's a little bit smaller, obviously, than the FBS. I mean, you're going to get more attention to detail. I mean, you could go to a bigger school, you know, Ohio State, Florida State, USC, and you could be one of those, you know, 90 players that they have on scholarship, but you know, how much are you going to play? You know, how much attention to detail? You know, are you going to be able to graduate in 4 years? Those are things. Obviously, I didn't work at one of those schools, but those are some of the questions you got to ask yourself before you step foot on a campus or make decisions. You come to the FCS, and I think, number one, if you're that good, you're going to play. And they're going to find kids. I mean, you look at the second pick in the NFL draft this year, the quarterback from Dakota State, and you go look at any one of those kids. I think any one of those kids could play at an FBS school. And they just happen to be in an FCS school who is getting looked at. They just won another national title. It is great football at this level. Maybe not as good as, you know, the Pac-10 or the Big 12 or, you know, the Big 10, one of those type of schools, but it is still outstanding college football where kids are getting recognized. They're still getting drafted in the NFL. They're going to graduate probably in 4 years, maybe not at a big, huge institution. And the biggest thing is I think that you'll get a chance for some more exposure being on the field and playing. You know, the bigger schools, you got to look at, you know, are you going to play and how soon? Or do you go to an FCS school and maybe you start for 4 years, you become an All-American and you get your chance, other than maybe playing 1 or 2 years in an BS school. But I think the FCS has done a great job promoting its football the last 3 years. nowadays with the social media and everything that goes on, it's taken off. And again, there's a lot of schools in our level right now, like North Dakota State. I bet you any one of those kids would be playing at a bigger school if they wanted to be, but they chose North Dakota State for a reason, and it was the right fit, and they got exposure, and they just won how many national championships, and the quarterback was the second pick in the NFL draft this year. So there is a chance. I don't think you have to go to a Division 1A school or an FCS school just make it to the NFL. The FCS has a lot of great teams and a lot of great players, and those kids do get looked at, and maybe they play like we said, instead of 1 year or 2 years at the FCS level, they're starting for all 4 years at the FBS level. You look at some of the schools in the Northeast this year, Harvard, Dartmouth, Villanova, New Hampshire. I mean, all those schools have been in Fordham. I mean, they've all been in the playoffs, and they've all had kids that got drafted or have played. They've had a successful, New Hampshire's been in the playoffs, I think, 11 years in a row or 12 years in a row, and Villanova, same thing. I mean, those are great schools academically. Those kids graduate in 4 years, and they played for 4 years and made a name for themselves and got themselves in position. So I think the FCS is doing a great job of what they're doing in terms of promoting our level of football, and I just hope it continues that way. And I think when kids step on some of those campuses and see what's in front of them, that they're a little shocked, and they can be very happy at a school like that as well.
Now that one quarter of the 2016 football season is complete, let's take a look at some of the big surprises and performances so far this season.
I think one of the biggest surprises so far this season, this first quarter of the season, obviously has to be the big-time upsets that we've seen FCS programs over FBS programs, starting with Richmond's blowout victory of Virginia 37-20. You also look at North Dakota State knocking off 13th-ranked Iowa 23-21 in impressive fashion. So it's always impressive when you see those teams go up a level and knock off those big titans of the Power 5 conferences. And you also look at Albany's 4-0 start. That's been surprising as well. The Great Danes have done a great job on both ends of the field, offense and defense. And one of the best performances I've seen so far this year was quarterback Brandon Duncan's 505 yards passing and 4 touchdowns in triple overtime in a victory over Alcorn State to get Arkansas Pine Bluff's first victory of the season. That was just an impressive job by a quarterback, getting his team back in that ball game and helping them ultimately win it.
Also, let's take a look at some of the front runners for the FCS Award, starting with the Walter Payton Award, which is given to the most outstanding offensive player in the FCS. There's always a bevy of options when you're talking the Payton Award, and looking at this list, you'll see some new names appear on our list since the last time we put together one back in the preseason. 2 Southern Jaguars and running back Leonard Tillery and wide receiver Willie Quinn are the only collection of teammates to make the list. Quinn right now leads the FCS in receiving yards with 483 and is second in touchdowns with 6. The 5'5", 165-pound senior has increased his value with his receiving exploits in addition to what he does on the field as a returner. 2 Big Sky passers in Gage Gubrud of Eastern Washington and Case Cookers of Northern Arizona make our list, and Cookers leads the nation right now in touchdown passes with 13, while Gubrud leads in passing yards with 1,430. Alejandro Benefield of Chattanooga is another newcomer on the list. The junior signal caller has led his Mocs to an undefeated season so far and has tossed 11 touchdown passes in the process. In 20 years of the Buck Buchanan Award, which is given to the nation's most outstanding defensive player, 9 have gone to Big Sky players, and this year we may see them get their 10th player, as there's another big-time playmaker in Mac Bignell of Montana State. Bignell has racked up an impressive 28 solo tackles on the season and does an outstanding job in coverage. But when you look at Guy Stallworth of Grambling, you also have to be impressed. Stallworth has 26 solo tackles as a defensive back, and Northern Iowa's defensive lineman Carter Schultz and Sam Houston State's P.J. Hall are mainstays on any defensive accolades list and are having great starts to the season. I also like what I'm seeing from Houston Baptist linebacker Garrett Dolan and defensive lineman Ebenezer Ogundeko from Tennessee State. Looking at this list from top to bottom, it may be harder to choose from this list as opposed to it is for the Payton Award. It's just been a great defensive year so far in the FCS. The Jerry Rice Award is given to the nation's top freshmen, and so far it's been quiet on the freshman front, but there have been some guys that have made immediate impacts on their respective teams already as we take a look at this list. Linebacker G. Stanley is playing out of his mind right now for Robert Morris, and Stanley has shown the ability to apply pressure with his 5.5 sacks on the season and also 5.5 TFLs. That's getting the job done when your name is called. Quarterback Tyree Adams of Western Carolina is also showing big-time talent as the starting quarterback for the Catamounts, tossing 7 touchdown passes so far this season. The Eddie Robinson Award is given to the nation's top coach in the FCS, and last year the award went to Joe Moglia of Coastal Carolina, and there are a ton of coaches worthy of this honor, as you can see here by the guys we've listed here on this list, and there's no shortage of candidates. Head coach Rob Scarlett of Georgetown has his team 3-0 for the first time since 1999, and Russ Huesman of Chattanooga leads an undefeated Mocs team that has only given up 35 points on the season. East Tennessee State's Carl Torbush deserves credit for his quick rebuilding job that he's done with the Bucs squad, who are sitting at 2-1 on the season. We'll take a quick break and be back with more of the FCS Kickoff.
New York City, the media capital of the world. But in America, there is a world of media at our fingertips, from coast to coast. The broadcast media industry connects us in so many ways and remains on the cutting edge of providing us news and entertainment. Have you ever pictured yourself working in the media? Did you ever dream of working in TV or on the radio? Make your dreams come true today. Connecticut School of Broadcasting is the oldest and largest group of communication schools in the country. At Connecticut School of Broadcasting, you'll learn by doing with hands-on training straight from professional broadcasters. There is job placement assistance for graduates, day and evening courses available. Graduate and get into the job market in only 8 or 16 weeks. Don't waste another second daydreaming about what you want to do with your life. Call 1-800-TV-RADIO and start living your dream today.
Welcome back to Football Game Plan's FCS Kickoff. We are in the 4th quarter of this week's episode, so let's continue our travels as we preview more games coming out of the Midwest and West regions. And we'll start in Fargo, North Dakota, where the Redbirds step up to take their swing at the Bison of North Dakota State.
As always, when the Redbirds face the Bison, they'll attempt to give them a little taste of what they feed everyone else: physical running game and gap-sound defensive play. What has to happen for them in order to pull off the upset will be their ability to sustain drives and make consistent plays in the passing game. The Redbirds defense will have to be able to consistently maintain and reset the line of scrimmage versus a Bison offensive line that's as solid as they come. For North Dakota State in this contest, I look for quarterback Easton Stick as the biggest X factor. Stick, in my opinion, has room to grow as a passer and as a decision maker. The bye week should have been beneficial to him as he got a chance to hone in on those particular areas of improvements. Defensively for the Bison, can they keep Illinois State in 2nd and long and 3rd and long situations? That'll be key in this one. Ultimately, I think Illinois State's defense will end up costing them late in this ball game. The Redbirds have to get better on 3rd downs if they want to win. I don't think they're there just yet to make this happen. I like North Dakota State. This is going to be a really good game between Missouri State and Indiana State. The Bears are 2-1 on the season with an impressive win over Murray State. Defense and special teams has been the name of the game for the Bears, but they're getting good play from quarterback Breck Ruddock, who has completed 65% of his passes and averages 212 yards passing per game. Indiana State's offense looks to be a problem for opposing defenses. We talked last week about their offensive line and how well they can dictate up front, but their passing game looks to have hit its stride last week in a victory over Illinois State. Now, defensively, the matchup for the Sycamores will be to do what you have to do in order to not allow Missouri State's running game to get going. That's where Indiana State has issues, which ultimately leads teams to be able to sustain drives. They've been in a lot of close ones this season, but I do think they finally pick up the decisive win, as I think they will do a great job versus Missouri State's offense and come away with the victory. Another early season key game in the Big Big Sky Conference as Southern Utah travels to Missoula to take on the Grizzlies. An opportunistic defense for the T-Birds has led them to a 2-1 start, and you have to like what you see from Southern Utah on that side of the ball, which was a big-time question mark heading into the season. They picked off 4 passes last week in a victory over Portland State, and they'll get their chance for more versus Montana's quarterback Brady Gustafson, who, while talented, makes at least 2 to 3 passes a game where defenders can come away with the football. The Grizzlies are coming off a tough loss to Cal Poly, and that Grizz defense just couldn't figure out the Mustangs' option attack quick enough to get the victory. Now, offensively speaking, Gustafson had a great day throwing the football to Jerry Louis McGee as a redshirt freshman hauled in 21 receptions for 155 yards and 2 touchdowns. I think you'll see a bounce-back performance by that Grizz defense, and look for Montana to be able to force 3 and outs, putting the ball back in Gustafson's hands, and I think the offense will definitely know what to do with it and put the ball back in the end zone. And finally, Cal Poly, fresh off a huge win versus Montana, travels to Grand Forks to take on the North Dakota Fighting Hawks. Now, who can stop the run will be the biggest question for both defenses in this ball game. The Cal Poly Mustangs defense has 30 TFLs on the season, which is just flat out balling. That shows a great deal of both line resetting and team defense. I also like how quarterback Daniel Graves is playing so far this season. He's been the biggest reason why they are 3-1 on the year. His passing efficiency helps keeps defenses off balance, defending that option attack. North Dakota is a good football team that finds ways to win. If the first 2 games of the season are of any indication, it shows you that if they can protect the football, they'll be very tough to beat. Quarterback Keaton Studford plays extremely well in the fourth quarter of games. They'll need him to start the game on fire versus Cal Poly, as that option attack is pretty potent, but I do think the Fighting Hawks defense is up to the challenge. I like North Dakota in a low-scoring game.
So that's it for this week's episode. I'm Emory Hunt, the czar of the playbook. Be sure to follow us on all of our social media accounts, and also be sure to check out our podcast, the FCS Opening Drive, on iTunes, and stay tuned for our FCS Conference Whip-Arounds, where we go around the 13 conferences in the FCS with our FCS correspondents.